Yes, I had a mammogram yesterday and it came out clear.
Very good.
If no one else prays, I don't know if I have enough material to teach for a whole 55 minutes.
Yeah, Patrick Juarez, he's 11 years old and they found a growth in on his brain. They have sent the, what do you call it when they take apart?
Biopsy.
Yeah, biopsy to Cleveland, so he's just waiting to see if it's cancerous or not. So pray for him and especially pray for his family.
Patrick Juarez.
Good kid. Yeah, his neighbor playing baseball with him.
Yeah, I told my friend that I would pray for her. She's going through some mental issues with having to move out of her home of over 35 years and don't even have a place to go. So I just told her I would pray for her, and she was very comforted by that. So just that God will give her peace and wait on God. Her name's Jan.
Pray for Jan.
I want to pray for a safe trip for me and my wife to go to Abilene this weekend.
John Green.
Please pray for my brother Dan. He is going to meet with my sister. They're both from California, and he's going through some depression following being grounded as a pilot because of heart issues. So keep him in your prayers. I got a praise report. My daughter has finished her second year and worked on her internship, and she was offered a job and with Greenberg, and she's now studying for her licensing, professional licensing. So she needs some help there.
Okay. Anybody else? Fantastic.
So my nephew's mother-in-law is going for, she already had one eye done for cataract surgery. She's going tomorrow for the second. First one went really well. She said it was the easiest surgery she's ever had. So just praise for the first one going well and prayers for tomorrow. Her name is Marge. And then some of you may know Mickey. He comes here sometimes for Bible study, usually sits over here. That is one of my best friend's sons, and it's a praise and glory to God that he's now coming to this church and attending on a regular basis. He reached out tonight asking for prayers. He's been trying to come to study, but a lot of stuff churning family-wise for him, and so he just asked for prayers to lift up his family. And you know, we're in spiritual warfare here, people, so let's lift him up. And then also I wanted to lift up Cindy and Al, because they both had injections in their knees, and we're going to pray that those were successful. So, and then I have some from Mike online, which I'll go through when I do the prayer. Any last requests from anyone? Okay, let's go to our Jesus, who's awesome. Father God, thank you again for the beautiful day that you've given us. Thank you for the temperature moderating a little bit for some of us who don't like the humidity. Whatever the day is, you've woken us up and you've kept us on this earth for your purpose. And so I pray, Lord, that you'll reveal that to us. Remind us that while you want us to have a bountiful life here, a rich life, it's supposed to be rich and bountiful in you. So let us not be of the world, but just be in it, and leading our lives based on your guidance. That's what I pray for all of us here tonight. We lift these requests to you, Father God. We ask for your divine intervention in all of them. First, just lifting up Marge, who's going to be having her second eye surgery, and just so thankful, Lord, that she's had some rough surgeries in the past, and so I pray for just ease of surgery, ease of healing, and full and total vision return to her. I'm also lifting up Mickey and his family. We're in difficult spiritual warfare times, Lord, and he has a desire to grow closer to you, Lord, and so I pray that you will continue to draw him so that he can be the lead in his family, so he can lead his family to saving grace in Jesus and a life that's rich in you. He has a young son he's raising, and I pray that what his son will see is you coming out of his dad, and that Mickey will grow in his faith and his walk with you. Help him to know he's surrounded by brothers and sisters who love him and want the best for him. And we're lifting up Mike, who usually comes on Wednesdays. He's not feeling well tonight, Lord, so we're just praying that he'll get back on the other side of health and wellness, and hopefully he gets to watch tonight. I hope he's not feeling too sick, to at least watch and be online. We're lifting up his prayers of Israel for wisdom and protection. Praying for pastors and elders all around the world, and specifically in our church too, because we love them so much. We're lifting up the elections, our whole political climate right now, Lord. We're just trusting you for your will to be done in our country. He has an unspoken request as well, and he wrote something down about Psalm 24, so I think maybe just everyone, I would say read it. I read it, it's good. Go ahead and absorb that. Lifting up Cindy, we're thanking you, Lord, for a clear mammogram. For us women, that's always a concern, and I just pray that you'll continue to keep your healing hands on her. We're lifting up Patrick Juarez, Lord, this 11-year-old kid with a growth on his brain. What a heartbreaking, just to hear those words as a parent would be devastating, but then to have your child go through a biopsy of it, and the worry and fear they must be feeling as they wait for these results. Lord, I pray that the peace of Jesus will reign in their home as they wait for the word. I pray that it's clear. I pray that it's nothing, that maybe it's just something they can remove, and this young man will have a wonderful long life that's healthy. Just praying for your will in that, Father. That their family feels supported and loved. We're lifting up Jan, who is now struggling with the loss of her home, having to leave it and move out, and she doesn't even have another place to go. That is the scariest feeling in the world, and I know it well, Lord. So I pray your peace will wash over her, that you will have something amazing waiting for her when the time is right, that she will turn to the right people that she can trust and who are for her, and that the provision will be there for her to move into a new place. That'll be wonderful. Also lifting up Cindy and Al, who had their knee injections. Lord, I pray that there's nothing worse than being uncomfortable when you're trying to walk, and so I just pray that they'll have real healing from these injections, and it will sustain them and give them back that vibrancy of life to be able to walk with confidence. Also praying for safety for Ron and Bev as they travel and go out of state. Lord, just that they'd have safe travels on the road and a wonderful time while they're away in Galena, and that it would be a time of just, really enjoyment, and that they'd have that time of renewal. Sometimes it's nice to get into a different environment, and that would be that experience for them. We're also praying to you, Lord, for John's request. Dan, his brother, is going to be meeting with his sister, and Dan is struggling right now due to health issues that have caused him to have to leave his job. That can be very hard, especially, men, that's their purpose sometimes for them, their job, and to lose that and to have it taken from you can be very difficult. So I pray that you'll just encourage him, he'll feel lifted up, and that you'll reveal your purpose for him and for his life. And we're praising you in Thanksgiving for Nicole, who's had just a successful internship. She's been given a job offer, and now she's going into that last phase of study to get her licensing. And we just pray that you will surround her, that you will uplift her, and that she will continue to have great success. She puts in all the hard work, Lord. She's a real hard-working kid, and we love her, and we pray for nothing but the best for her. And we lift up this study to you, Lord. We praise you and thank you for Colin. I know it's going to be hard for all of us when he goes back to study, but we hope he knows how much we appreciate him, how much we love him and care for him, and that we pray this next phase of education for him is one that's fruitful and will continue to bring about your will in his life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. I don't know if this is saying on its own. Perfect. Okay. Well, today we're going to be looking at Genesis 9. Last week, Dave covered in Genesis 8, the flood narrative, the recession of the flood itself. And this week, we're going to be covering what happens after the flood and the rest of Noah's life. So, just as we've done for the past couple times I've taught, I'll read the subsections I've lined out first, and then we'll go over some points, ask some questions, try to understand what the text is doing, and go from there. So, I'm going to start by reading Genesis 9, that's verses 1 through 7. Genesis 9, 1 through 7. And it reads as follows. Then God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. All the animals of the earth, all the birds of the sky, all the small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the fish in the sea will look on you with fear and terror. I have placed them in your power. I have given them to you for food, just as I have given you grain and vegetables. But you must never eat any meat that still has the lifeblood in it. And I will require the blood of anyone who takes another person's life. If a wild animal kills a person, it must die. And anyone who murders a fellow human must die. If anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. Now, be fruitful and multiply and repopulate the earth." So, one of the main things I think that's worth pointing out in this chapter is we kind of have a reaffirmation of the basics of creation. As I point out in the handout, in verse 1, we have literally the command to be fruitful and multiply, which we see in Genesis 1, verse 28. And then we also have the other main part of kind of human existence at creation pre-fall, is this idea of human dominion over the earth, and specifically animals. But interestingly, unlike Genesis 1, we get these additional details. This idea that the animals are going to fear human beings. They're going to have terror in the face of humanity. And I think that something I read across a bunch of different commentaries is we're getting hints here that even though God has cleansed the earth from the unrighteous people, sin is still present. And we have this fear and we have this terror that we did not have mentioned originally in Genesis. And additionally, with regard to animals, we now have this explicit provision that they can serve as food. I know last week we talked about, or a couple weeks ago we talked about, were they eating animals on the ark? Did they eat before the flood animals? We don't know for sure, but what we do know at this point is they serve as food as well. And a lot of commentators point out that this is something we didn't see in the initial creation scene. They would eat the fruits of the trees, but now they're also eating animals. The only caveat being, which I know Betty mentioned she has questions about, is that there's this one prohibition that is against the consumption of the lifeblood. Now, why can they not eat the lifeblood? And what exactly does this even mean? Now, this I'm opening up to you all. What do you think as regards to either of those two questions? Why can't they eat it? And what does the lifeblood necessarily mean? There's different answers different scholars have come to. Any thoughts? Stephanie?
Is it the heart? That they're not supposed to eat the heart of the animal?
That's interesting. I haven't read anyone say that in particular, like the actual muscle of the heart. I haven't heard that.
I mean, all the blood flows from it.
No, that
That's
makes
my
sense.
first thought.
Yeah. John?
I get a picture in ancient England where they used to hang the animals upside down and let them bleed out. But since sin is still in the world, I imagine that disease could be spread by eating the lifeblood.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe there's a logical, kind of biological reason. Interesting. Anyone else? Tony or Joe and then Tony?
The blood is sacrosanct for this thing, so it's talking about the
Can't
blood.
hear you, I'm sorry. Say that again.
A little louder, talking about the blood.
The blood is sacrosanct, you said, so the blood's holy in a way.
Right.
Okay, that's a good answer. Tony?
I was along the same vein, so to speak, where for sacrifices and things like that, they were, it was part of the holy process where the life is in the blood and there's a sacredness to it. So that's why it's almost like would it be sacrilege to just treat it as such, like, oh, I know I'm drinking a cup of blood or something.
Yeah, now, so building off of Joe and Tony, one of the main things people think this could mean is literally don't consume blood. And in the ancient world, people realized, man, if you lose a lot of blood, you just die. So there was a scientific perception that life literally resided in blood. And so if you drank blood, you were drinking the life force. Now, why would that be a problem? A lot of biblical scholars believe that life was considered something that only God alone owned. Like God has the ownership over all life. And so if you drank the blood, this lifeblood, this source of life, you were actually trying to claim that which was God's. And so that's one reason that people will read it that way. Other scholars also think it literally just means don't eat animals that are still alive. That might seem crazy, but there are actually cultures that still do this today. And so there are those who read this as more of just a prohibition on ways we consume. Don't eat it while it still has its lifeblood, which would mean don't eat an animal while it's still alive. And many animals do that. I don't know if you know that. Almost all canines, they will eat an animal while it's still alive. And so that's kind of a limitation God's putting on the way humans consume animals after giving them the ability in verse 3 to consume them. So some will read this as restrictions to the allowance for animal consumption to make it more humane. So either it's God is the source of life and the owner of all life, so don't consume the blood because the blood is the source of life and therefore it's God's. Or it's don't eat living beings because that's cruel. Those are the two main answers we'll get. If you're going to go, like Tony mentioned, kind of back to the sacrificial system, you're very often going to go with the prior answer concerning lifeblood, meaning literally the power of life being in physical blood. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Betty, did you have a question on the...
No, that's basically, because when I went through the commentary.
Oh yeah, sorry. I asked you, it's not okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense because when I went through the commentaries, I wasn't quite sure what they were saying. So that those two explanations make a lot of sense to me at this point.
And with that in mind, it's interesting that after Christianity comes onto the scene and all the dietary restrictions are done away with, this is pre-Noah, or this is pre-Moses, right? So this is a very early restriction, and yet even after Christ, the prohibition against blood is no longer kept now. But even in the Jerusalem Council, I think in Acts 19, they actually do still say you shouldn't have blood. I'm not saying you guys can't have blood sausage. I don't know why you'd want it. In my personal experience, it's not great. But it is interesting to see how when the Jews, trying to understand Christianity in the earliest days of the church, kind of lift the restrictions of the Mosaic Law, the one they do really keep is don't consume blood. And I think it's probably because this goes even further back than Moses. This goes back to Noah. So that's just kind of a fun historical fact. I'm not saying we can't have blood. Like I said, I've never really had to struggle with that personally as a conundrum of blood consumption. But if we have any Polish people in here, I know duck blood soup is a big thing. So the next major element of this subsection I think is interesting is we now have an explicit prohibition against murder. And what's funny is animals are actually also considered guilty of killing human beings. So why is it not allowed for humans to kill one another according to this text? Tell me. Who's got the mic?
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I think it states that humans are the image of God, born in the image of God, so it's a representative of God. So then, even if an animal or anybody else, it's kind of a punishment.
Yep, it's literally the image of God, and so that's the third element we get from the original Genesis 1 creation narrative. What defines humanity? Well, we're made in the image of God. We are to be fruitful and multiply, and we're to have dominion. We have all of these things reaffirmed after the flood. And so a lot of people will coin this post-flood chapter as kind of a reaffirmation or a new creation. But of course, it's not new like we mean in Revelation. John Reed?
I think, God commanded us to be fruitful and multiply, so that would be contradictive to murdering each other.
Yeah, that would be funny if he's like, now multiply, but you could go kill each other if you wanted to. No, that makes sense, that's fair. Grandfather? Grandfather, I'm going more formal. I know. Grandfather.
Well, God was the giver of life, and He's the only one that should be the taker of life.
Makes sense. And it's interesting that in response to how terrible death is, the death penalty is the response, which might almost seem counterintuitive to some people, that if it's so wrong to kill, the response to killing is killing. But most people just say, well, that demonstrates how seriously the taking of life is taken by God.
Well, there's also the element of justice. Since God is just and He gave this command, that is justice for that particular.
Exactly, yep. I think this does demonstrate in the midst of having to set up these new parameters for this new humanity, just how serious God takes sin still. And it's interesting, it's not God now who's going to be the instrument of this punishment. He's saying it'll be by human hands that you're killed. Whereas it's God who does the flood here. It's humans who will be the instrument of divine punishment. We see that throughout the Old Testament as well. Anyone else on this subsection? Mandated. It is mandated. Yep. All makes sense? Any other questions? This is honestly, to me, a relatively straightforward chapter until we get into the last part about seeing your father naked. Now, I understand why that's gross for the sons, but we'll get to why God was, or why this all happens.
It's more gross for the daughters.
I don't know what's up with that. I don't know what's going on with the wives and daughters here. They don't get brought up, but hopefully they didn't have to see their father-in-law naked. Let's read this next section. This is going to be verses 8 through 17. The word of the Lord reads as follows. Then God told Noah and his sons, I hereby confirm my covenant with you and your descendants, and with all the animals that were on the boat with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, every living creature on earth. Yes, I am confirming my covenant with you. Never again will floodwaters kill all living creatures. Never again will a flood destroy the earth. Then God said, I am giving you a sign of my covenant with you and with all living creatures for all generations to come. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. It is the sign of my covenant with you and with all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant with you and with all living creatures. Never again will the floodwaters destroy all life. When I see the rainbow in the clouds, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and every living creature on earth. Then God said to Noah, yes, this rainbow is the sign of the covenant I am confirming with all the creatures on earth. And I think when you read this out loud, you really see how repetitive this is. I think for us, it's very easy to just kind of skim it and be like, yep, okay, God's making a covenant. But just reading it out right now, you hear 3 or 4 repetitions of the same things over and over again. And I think there is a reason to that. But as we dive into this subsection, the first thing I want to point out is that God makes this covenant with all living things. It's interesting because most of the time when we think about God's covenant, it's with all people or with his people. But here, he's making a covenant with all life. And like we said earlier, many people read this as an affirmation of creation. And therefore, God isn't just saying, I'm here for people. He's saying, I'm here for the whole earth. I'm still the God of all creation, and I still will the good of all creation. Now, when we get into this covenant, it has interesting content. Primarily, God is promising not to flood the earth again. Why is this covenant made? And are there conditions to this covenant? Usually when we think about a covenant, it's kind of like a relationship that's reciprocal. The Mosaic Law is, here are the rules, you follow them, you will be my people, I will be your God. Here we have a covenant. What are the conditions? Why is it made? Open to the floor. And let me know if that question's kind of unclear, but what are the conditions of this covenant, and why does the covenant have to be made? Any thoughts? If not, I've got answers. I'll throw out something here. I've read a couple different commentators who said, can you imagine being Noah after the flood and what it would feel like every time it rains? And you just wonder, if they'd never seen rain before, and then the first time they see rain, it's this gargantuan, life-destroying flood. Now, every time you experience rain, which is actually a gift from here on out, right? Rain allows plants to grow, allows him to grow the vine that we're about to see, all these things. Some scholars remark that God has to lay down his own rules now, so people know, hey, every time it rains, you do not have to be afraid that now you've been the one left behind. That I'm going to do this again, but I didn't tell you this time. And so some people say it's for the sake of humanity. Why is there this covenant? It's so that mankind can live on this earth without constant fear of the natural world, that God is just about to do the same destruction again. And then what are the conditions to this covenant? To kind of give you guys a little more to build off of, is there anything we see that humanity is supposed to do? I'm hearing no. And that's interesting because almost every other covenant in the Bible, there's an expectation that we respond. We got some rules earlier, but we don't have, in this covenant with Noah, anything that we're supposed to do. It doesn't say, if you don't sin again, I won't flood the earth. It doesn't say, if you follow these rules, if you don't drink blood, I won't flood the earth. It just says, I won't flood the earth. And I think what we're seeing here is that God is confirming that his love for creation is unending and that there is no chance that he is going to ever fully destroy what he's done. And he's making it clear that it doesn't matter what you do, I will preserve this world. So I think there's a level of God's steadfastness being highlighted. Stephanie?
I also, it kind of brought to mind, as I read this, like, he was saying, like, kind of, it's finished. I took what was necessary for the sin I saw, and sort of like his son, too. He died once for all, and it's done, right? This one was the first time it had to happen, but his promise to us, or to them at that time, was that he wouldn't do it that way ever again, but he never said he wouldn't destroy the world. He just said it wouldn't be by water.
Yeah, and if you read Revelation, he's like, oh, if not water, then fire. So, yes, but I think you're right in pointing those things out. And to highlight what we've just been speaking about, he confirms this multiple times. In verse 11, he says, I'm making this covenant. I'm making this covenant. So it's clear it is set in stone. There's no doubt that God is going to keep his word with regard to the flood. No problem.
And I was reading in one of the commentaries too that, well, I think it's God's mercy too. He's showing his mercy through this, through this covenant. But also another place where the rainbow is also is in Revelation, where God is seated on the throne and the rainbow is around him. And I thought that was nice because that was the beginning of the new creation and at the end.
I think that's great to point out. I think Revelation is purposefully echoing the imagery, but whereas here, as we're going to see, there's still sin in the world. even with God's promise. There in Revelation, we get the rainbow, but this rainbow really is like the final symbol of God's mercy.
Right.
I don't know if my thing turned off.
Is your battery low?
Yeah, the battery is low. Let me just grab the mic. Thank you so much. Mentioning the rainbow, why do you think God chose the rainbow as a sign? This is a question for y'all. In verses 12 through 14, he says he's going to make a sign of his covenant, and it's going to be the rainbow in the clouds. Why the rainbow? Can John read? He's ready.
Because the refraction of light through water droplets creates the rainbow, so every time it rains, people would not be in fear because they would see this rainbow.
That's actually a great answer. One of the main things people highlight is when you see the rainbow, it's usually after rain.
Right.
And so every time you see a rainbow, it means that the storms have ended or at least abated enough to see it, and therefore God has kept his covenant. I promised I won't flood the earth again. The rain has stopped. Here's the rainbow. Yes, sir.
He put it up in the sky so everybody could see it.
That's a good point too. It makes sure that this covenant is universal. Yes, Stephen? Perfect.
I think about, I've placed my rainbow in the clouds. It's not like it's ever gone. It's always present. We just might not see it until the rains come. But it's sitting there in the clouds all the time.
I'm tracking, yeah, and it's an eternal sign of the covenant in a sense, but we only notice it in those certain contexts. Makes sense to me? Anyone else? There's other people who also mention that, though the Hebrew word here that we use for rainbow also does have the symbolism of a weapon, like a bow. We hear in English rainbow, because it's got that shape. But also in ancient Hebrew and the ancient Near Eastern culture broadly, the idea of a bow as a weapon translates well, and it's God placing his weapon in the sky for us to see it, which means, though, he's not wielding it. And so there are some scholars who think that instead of God wielding a weapon so as to smite humanity, we are seeing that his weapon is put down. And this is interesting because other ancient gods like Marduk and Baal and all them were often depicted holding bows, pointing it down at earth. Instead, here we have God putting his bow in the sky for us to see, but the idea is he's not wielding it. So that's another thing some scholars will point out, trying to say what we're getting is a contrast between ancient symbolism that saw the rainbow as a weapon of God being pointed at the world, or a weapon of these pagan gods. Here what we're seeing is God has put down that weapon. Grandpa. Yeah.
The flood was a terrible thing, and the rainbow was a beautiful thing. When you see a rainbow, you feel good. It's kind of euphoric, you know? Oh, look at that rainbow. Everybody says, oh man, I saw a rainbow the other day. It was great. It was from here to there and everything, you know? And after something terrible like the flood, it was a nice gift to have the rainbow.
Yeah, I mean, something to not be afraid when you look up in the sky.
Sometimes you get two of them.
A double rainbow, yeah. Then God's really not going to flood the earth at that specific. Then you know it's like, oh, we're really good right now. No, I think those are all good points. And I think it's, you know what, never mind. The symbolism of the rainbow in the modern day is completely different. But that's a bad one where every commentary I read, man, that comes up, they'll be like, a rainbow. I know, I had a friend who would drive by, we were looking at a rainbow one time, he goes, man, the sky's getting awfully liberal. And I was like, oh, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's okay. I didn't say that. Someone said that to me. So, as we move on to verses 15 through 17, we have this interesting statement. We've had a couple of these in early Genesis that God is promising to remember. One of the things I want to highlight is here, it's not about us. We just mentioned that earlier. God makes this covenant with no expectation of humanity's participation. It's God's promise to remember. When I see this rainbow, I'm not going to destroy humanity. It's not about us reminding him. God will be the one to remember. And then also, just to highlight again, we keep seeing this anthropomorphic language. Of course, God's not going to forget something. We believe God knows all things, but for the sake of narrative, oftentimes the people in the Old Testament will say God remembers. I know some people get confused. Well, did God forget? I don't think the implication is that he forgot. It's more just explaining it in human terms so that we can understand these phenomenon. Any thoughts, questions, concerns so far? Man, we're flying this time. That's good. I know. I don't know. I hope we have enough. We'll have plenty. What I think is interesting, and Stephanie did bring this up, is that this covenant does not mean an eternal preservation of the status quo or the creation as it stands. God promises not to flood the earth, but that does not mean that God will not end this world. As we're going to see throughout the New Testament, there is a promise of an end. We already brought up Revelation. And I looked in particular at Luke 17, 26 through 27, which predicts a day. It says this: just as in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating, drinking, marrying, and being given in marriage up to the day of Noah entered the day that Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all. And what this is saying is there will be a day like the day of Noah, where people will be sinful, but they'll be living their daily lives. But there will be destruction, not by water, as is made evident by Genesis, but there will be destruction when the Son of Man returns. And so we do have this notion in the New Testament that God will keep the promise, but there will still be a day of destruction and ultimate judgment. And that is going to become evident why it's necessary as we get to the last section and we see that sin is still present, even though all we have left in this world is righteous Noah and his family, and yet immediately we have sin re-enter the picture. Before we get to the last section, any comments, questions, or concerns?
Just a moment.
Horace.
Ladies and gentlemen, Horace.
Thank you very much. Isn't also the rainbow proof that the flood was over the entire earth? Because some people still argue that the flood was only in certain sections of the earth, but this indicates, and rainbows are everywhere, that the flood was worldwide.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought much about it. One could argue that for sure. I don't think rainbows, when they're seen, are necessarily universal phenomenon, but somewhat geographically relative, right? Like if there's a rainbow right now up in Oak Lawn, doesn't mean there'll be a rainbow in Shanghai or something. But I understand what you're saying. The fact that there's rainbows around the world might demonstrate that this was a universal phenomenon that God is now promising to not replicate. I haven't thought particularly as to whether or not that's an evidence for a global flood, but I think that's reasonable to bring up, and I appreciate you doing so. I'm not sure, but I think that's a reasonable claim. Anyone else? Al?
I have a little problem with the flood. Not with God. God did it. But understanding it,
Okay.
that the people were sinful, and then we go into verse 9 here, and it says that Noah was sinful. So it's confusing to me.
Yeah, honestly, that is a perfect segue into this last section, and we'll deal with this question of how does, if Noah is this one righteous man who's worth preserving, what does it mean that he immediately, or his family at least, immediately falls into what seems to be some kind of sin?
So like the sin that the people on the earth at the time, was it different than the sin that Noah did? I don't understand.
Well, I appreciate that. And in typical traditional Church of God fashion, I appreciate you saying drinking is a sin. No, I'm just teasing. But that is true. Technically, that's in the Church of God bylaws, or it used to be. But I think that's a good point. Let's get to it once we get to the sin, and we've elaborated what it is for anyone who hadn't gotten the chance to read it. I'll read that subsection now. Keep Al's question in mind, though. It's a central question as we try to understand this last section. Grandpa, right quick.
Why do you think God chose the flood?
Why do I think God chose a flood as opposed to other means of destroying the world?
Sure, there's lots of ways he could do it. He could just snap his fingers.
Yeah, you can be like Thanos. But,
I mean, you may not.
No,
I just want your opinion.
I appreciate
you.
it.
Have any info on it?
Yeah, so I think most scholars, as we read the flood narrative itself, will point out that what we're getting is a reversal of the creation imagery. So most people say why the flood is fitting is because one of the fundamental acts of creation is the separation of the waters. And so if God's undoing what he did, we're seeing it literally that these waters that were separated to make space for life are now collapsing back in. And so it's fitting because it's a bringing back to that primordial chaos, that which God had built. Could he have done it another way? I'm sure, but it fits the narrative of Genesis well, that what we're seeing explicitly is a return to that primordial kind of chaos that God starts with and builds off of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So could he have done it another way? Sure, but there is kind of a narrative potency to having water, when water is the initial, like I said, chaotic thing that he pulls life from, to then bring it back to water makes sense.
I was kind of thinking of the cleansing type of
That's true.
narrative where, you know, like baptism almost. It's a cleansing action, or, you know, like baptism is an outward sign of an inward commitment. But, you know, with the water and everything, I was just wondering what you thought about it.
No, I think that's a great point, and especially if you're reading from a more canonical perspective of the whole Bible in mind, that imagery of the cleansing power of water definitely can come into play. Most of the commentaries I read were focused primarily on Genesis, ancient Near Eastern thought, and so that's not what immediately came to my mind. But you would be 100% right in pointing that out, and many in the early church kind of talk about human baptism as almost a flood, where the sinful man within us is put to death, but we join the ark that is the church. So the church as an ark is a very common motif in the early church language and art and imagery. So I think that's a great thing to point out. This is kind of a baptism of the world in a way, but much more violent than the baptism we go through when we come to faith. Any other thoughts right quick? Tony?
I was thinking back to the whole covenant without stipulations. I was thinking, well, God is omnipotent beyond space and time. He kind of already foreseen that, well, I put anything on this, these guys aren't going to be able to handle that, so I don't want them to test my authority, you know, so he already seen the end story kind of thing, and just like, well, I'm not even going to bother, you know, I can't hold them to that standard because they're going to mess it up, so I think that...
Yeah, if God had said anything like, oh, you know, just don't say the word purple and I won't flood the earth, someone would be like, and you know, he would have been like, now I got to do it. Now I got to do it because I told you I'd do it. So you're right. I think God knows knows with our free will. And still, like we're about to talk about, it doesn't appear that sin is gone from the human race. Is about to be made very evident. So let's get to that last section in our closing 15 minutes. So I'm about to read verses 18 through 28 if you're following along with me. The sons of Noah who came out of the boat with their father were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the father of Canaan. From these three sons of Noah came all the people who now populate the earth. After the flood, Noah began to cultivate the ground, and he planted a vineyard. One day he drank some wine he had made, and he became drunk and lay naked inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw that his father was naked and went outside and told his brothers. Then Shem and Japheth took a robe, held it over their shoulders, and backed into the tent to cover their father. As they did this, they looked the other way so that they would not see him naked. When Noah woke up from his stupor, he learned what Ham, his youngest son, had done. Then he cursed Canaan, the son of Ham. May Canaan be cursed, may he be the lowest of servants to his relatives. Then Noah said, may the Lord, the God of Shem, be blessed, and may Canaan be his servant. May God expand the territory of Japheth. May Japheth share the prosperity of Shem. And may Canaan be his servant. Noah lived another 350 years after the great flood. He lived 950 years, and then he died. A very interesting episode in the text that honestly many scholars think we just are going to struggle till the ends of time making sense of exactly what's going on here with this episode of Ham and his father naked. Interestingly, we immediately see Noah being obedient, right? One of the calls of humanity is to tend the earth, and Noah does so. He tends the soil, and he makes a vineyard. And then he gets drunk off the wine. So interestingly, right, this has got to be a while after the flood, right? If he creates vines, this has to be at least one season. I don't know how long vines take to grow, but some varieties take 3 to 5 years to even produce fruit. And so we are living in a world where things seem to be going right for a little while at least, according to the narrative. But then Noah gets drunk. Now I want to ask, is this a problem in and of itself? Is the sin here that's being highlighted Noah being drunk? Or is it more what Ham does in the coming verses? Of course, if we're looking at a canonical perspective, in the New Testament, there's multiple condemnations of drunkenness. Now, I'm not saying that's all drinking, but of drunkenness. I've pointed out Galatians 5, Ephesians 5, and even Proverbs 23 speaks about drunkenness being sinful. So some scholars will say, well, Noah has sinned here. So we're seeing Noah, the one righteous man, sin by being drunk. Not sure what anyone thinks about that in particular, but there's the question is the sin Noah or is it Ham? Stephanie.
Who has the mic?
It's coming.
Can I speak first?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Speaking for adult children of alcoholics, I am very disappointed in Noah. He lived through the pre-flood. He saw the results of drunkenness. He knew what it did. He got his vineyards going. That's great, because all of us like sparkling grape juice.
Spoken like a Baptist.
Yeah. Amen. And he chose to ferment it. He chose to drink it. He chose to get drunk. And he made his family have to cover for him. He did not have accountability. He did not have responsibility. And I'm just very, very disappointed in Noah.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And that would be, one of the two main readings would be, one, we are supposed to see Noah as being flawed here. And the other one is, no, it's more the emphasis on Ham. But for the reasons you just gave, it's one of the main reasons people say what we're getting is a highlighting of even this righteous Noah is himself still under the sway of sin. Stephanie, and then did I say you give that again?
Yeah, what Noah did was open himself up to sin. He opened the door when he drank fermented grapes. He made himself vulnerable to sinning. It's why drunkenness is so frowned upon, because you've just opened a door. Your faculties aren't your own. You aren't in control anymore, and you'll be susceptible to sinning. The other part is his son. His son, and I think the reason he cursed his son was because in some ways, like the first time I read it, I was like, wait, why is he cursing this guy? Because he passed out naked. Like, why are you cursing your kid? But I realize now it was because he went out and was like, probably, it doesn't say it, but it implies he was like laughing about his father's nakedness to his brothers and thought that they would think it was funny too. And it said they came in to protect their father from further, visual stuff. So, not to say that in a good way, but I think it was twofold. They were both, it was both the son and the father that the sin came upon.
I appreciate that. So that's one definite way to read it. And that gets to a question that is just coming up next in the outline. Before we get to that, Betty.
Was sort of in where Stephanie is. The drunkenness in itself was not the sin. And I think the reason that Noah was so upset was because his son, instead of covering him, exposed him to other people. And instead of being modest and listening to the voice of God and covering his father, he thought about himself and how, showed his father off to other people. And I think that's basically why Noah cursed him.
Fantastic, and that gets us to that next question, which is, so Ham sees the nudity, tells his brothers, they cover him. Why is it such a big deal to see their father naked? And a lot of people will point out, it might not be seeing the nudity itself that's the problem. It's the fact that he goes and tells, rather than he could have done exactly what his brothers did and covered him. Others point out, now this is going to be odd, and this is going to sound very strange, but I saw this across many, many commentaries, so I'm not saying this is like a joke or anything, but there is a common euphemism in Hebrew and in the ancient Near East of exposing one's nakedness or seeing one's nakedness that means to sleep with someone. So there are commentators, if you read on Genesis, that will say why this is such a big deal is it appears, and this is not what I'm necessarily believing, but you'll see this if you read commentaries, that Ham sexually assaulted his father. Now I'm not saying anyone here has to believe that, but if you read enough commentaries, there is a phrase that's used elsewhere in the Bible of exposing someone's nakedness or seeing someone's nakedness. That would mean you have assaulted them or you've seen them. It's a euphemism because the Bible very rarely uses explicit language of sexual engagement. that will talk about like finding a vessel, or so they always use euphemism, uncovering a person's feet, another very weird euphemism in the Bible for sexual encounters. You'll notice it's weird. I'm only bringing that up because I know I heard Sharon mention, she was looking at commentaries. I don't think the commentaries you were reading are going to say that, but there are people who will. So if you're ever reading Genesis commentaries and you're like, what the heck is going on? Just be like, well, Colin warned me. Some people think that. I'm not necessarily convinced. I think a big thing here that we kind of skipped a second ago is nakedness is the initial thing that Adam and Eve are ashamed of. And what we're really getting highlighted is Noah's shame. Noah himself is in the state, he's naked, and there's something about nakedness after the fall that is demonstrative of sin in our fallen state. And so then, like you guys mentioned, Betty and Stephanie, to bring forth and tell people and expose their father to ridicule, a lot of people will say it's beckoning back to that Genesis 3 idea of they're ashamed of their nudity. And that also highlights that even Noah is still under the sway of sin, even though he's righteous, because if he were sinless or anything, and this were a really redeemed creation, there would be no problem with nudity. The point being, there still clearly is. So, this is interesting though. We keep talking about Noah's curse on his son. In fact, it's not on his son. Who's the curse on? Grandson. Why does he curse Canaan when Ham is the one to see him naked? His lineage, that's one answer. A lot of people will say the worst thing you can do in the ancient world especially is not curse a person, but curse their lineage. Because what you're saying is, this curse doesn't just die with you, it's going to keep going into future generations. So that's worse. And often in the ancient world, for example, the Sadducees in Jesus' day, they didn't believe there was an afterlife, literally. They believed you lived on through your children. So if you curse someone's children, you're cursing all that's left of them. So that's one reason people say to curse Canaan is the ultimate curse on Ham. Any other thoughts? So I heard lineage from Stephanie. Anyone else? Well, that's the main one I've read. Oh, who's got the mic? Fantastic. Oops, sorry.
So it kind of reminds you of the story of Ruth and Boaz, when Ruth uncovered his feet. Is there anything significant to that?
Speak a little louder into the mic, Greg.
Yes.
It reminds me of the story of Ruth and Boaz, when Ruth uncovered Boaz's feet when they were on the threshing floor, when she was laying next to him.
So that's actually a very interesting question, and without getting bogged down too much, if you read any modern commentaries on Ruth, there's debate as to what's happening when she takes care of Boaz and tends to him when he's drunk. Some people read this as she's literally prostituting herself. The image, like I said, of uncovering feet is consistently used in the Bible as a sexual euphemism. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, I don't know, but I will say, having gone to seminary and then also even at Wheaton, one of my friends is doing research on Ruth, and he reads that language as innately sexual language. I know it's a weird thing to talk about in a Bible study, but some people will read Ruth as she's literally prostituting herself to make ends meet, or to try to live, but then Boaz takes her in anyways. And it was very common in the ancient world for poor women to go to the threshing floor, prostitute themselves, and then receive something in return from the threshing harvest. I don't want to decry, and Ruth is like held up as a high figure in the Bible, so I don't want to be like, Ruth's a prostitute. But there are people who read that as a sexual encounter. I don't know for sure, but that is a reading you might see in some commentaries. Now, the second reason a lot of people will point out why curse Canaan over Ham, this is more historical critical. Well, the Israelites are going to, throughout history, have problems with the Canaanites. And so they're saying this is kind of a foreshadowing. Israel is going to go into the land after the Exodus and subjugate Canaan. So what we're getting here is just a prophecy from Noah. Well, these people are going to one day be subjugated by their brothers. And then Shem, I don't know if you guys knew this, the word Semite, like anti-Semite and all that, comes from Shem. Shem to Sem. So the people of Shem, the God of Shem, it even says it here, which is interesting, Shem will one day be over and above the children of Ham, over and above Canaan, which is what happens in history in the book of Judges and Joshua. Make sense?
So does that mean we're Japheth?
Are we Japheth? The exact way the lineages work out, we'll get to in the coming week or so. I don't know exactly where we are, because Shem is also not just Jews. Shem is like a larger group. Ham is also the Egyptians. Like the Egyptians are the children of Ham, and so the way those lineages work out is much wider than just like Gentile, Jew, Canaanite. I don't know if we're technically considered of Japheth according to this grouping. The Germans don't show up in the Bible as much as I think for a while they thought they did. But yeah, it's a good question. I know this German theologian who said you can't express the truth of the Bible outside of German. That cracks me up. But the last main thing we'll touch on before we get to these takeaways is that Noah still dies. And as you've probably noted throughout this study, one of the things I believe this chapter is highlighting is even though God has redeemed, in some sense, the world, cleansed it from sin at a macro scale, and he's made a promise that we've talked about of not destroying the earth again, we still see the products of sin. We still have commands against murder. Why? Because murder clearly is still a possibility. We have a son exposing his father's nakedness being tied back to the garden as a state that is associated with sinfulness after the fall. And so finally, what's the greatest sting of sin? Death. And so we have Noah, the righteous one, who's now been exposed to ridicule. He's become drunk. All these bad things that happen at the tail end of his life, he still dies too. And so we're seeing that even though God has cleansed the earth, there's still sin. And so the problem continues. And most scholars, if you read the whole Bible, you're going to see that consistently as God will cleanse his people. And then sin pops up again. He cleanses people and sin pops up again.
Yep.
Until, of course, Jesus Christ comes and defeats sin in a definitive fashion and then points to the ultimate destruction of sin when he returns. So that's the last main thing to highlight. Even Noah dies. Finally, also, people talk about the Bible sets out the 120-year life expectancy of a human being based on what we read, I think, in Genesis 6. But we do see Noah living 350 years extra after the fall. So there's no necessary reason to read 120-year lifespan is the max what a human can live. You might hear that brought up every once in a while. I know that came up a few weeks ago. Now, just a few summaries and takeaways before some closing questions. One, in the opening verses, we see the main elements of human creation confirmed. So God still has the same will. He still preserves that which is good. He wants us in his image. We're still in his image. Therefore, we cannot be killed, or we should not be killed. He gives us dominion, and he calls us to be fruitful and multiply. And so we have a repetition of the initial creation narrative. We also have the presence of sin. So even though God has cleansed the world in one sense, there is still sin. However, despite sin, God now makes a covenant that cannot be broken to preserve creation from the same kind of devastation as the flood. And then what I think is interesting, when we look at that story of Ham to Canaan, just as a broader, what do you take away from this? Not only God's faithfulness, but also the fact that our sins don't just affect us, but they travel generationally. And I think it's easy in modern America, where we're so individualistic, to think, well, I'm going to do what I want, or this is my life, I can do what I like. But we realize that the negative choices we make and the positive will live on. And just as Ham did this terrible thing, Canaan ends up suffering for generations, and his offspring and so on and so forth end up subjugated, all because of the sins of someone earlier along. We see that in Adam to all people today, but then also Ham to Canaan. And so that's a broader thing, the importance of taking serious our own sin, because it's never just our sin. It ends up impacting those around us. And then one last thing I forgot to include on y'all's outline is that this passage definitively demonstrates that sin is not just a social problem. I think a lot of people, especially in recent Christian history, have thought if we just made the world a better place, people would stop being evil. If we could just provide for people's basic needs, they would no longer be evil. Well, God provided. He took the best person among them and his family, and then they immediately fall back into sin. And I think what this demonstrates is through human effort, they'll never escape sin. Even Noah cannot escape sin. And so God has to make a covenant that they cannot break to preserve humanity. That's 8 o'clock on the dot. Any closing questions, comments, or concerns before we go into prayer? Okay. Hopefully that wasn't too sporadic. I don't know why. I think I over-caffeinated, so I feel like really zoned in, but at the same time it makes it hard for me to break focus on my screen. Awesome. Well, then let's pray. Lord God, thank you for your word and for this opportunity to grow in our knowledge and understanding of you, Lord. God, we lift you up as a faithful God, one who made a covenant that you have never broken, and one who pointed to a covenant that you would make through Christ that would not only preserve this world, but redeem it. So Lord God, we thank you for the gift of the rainbow, but more importantly, the gift of the cross. Lord, thank you for all you've provided, and for our fellow believers here who are to uplift us in the faith and remind us of the word that we just studied. Lord, thank you for all you provided, and in the precious name of your Son we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job.
Next time we see you, are you married?
Yeah.